Welcome back to another episode of Film Buff Bros, and today we're going to talk about 90s horror movies.
Oh yeah.
So, what were your top three picks?
For number 3 for me was Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah.
Which some people may not consider a horror movie, but it is listed as a drama horror, I think thriller on IMDb, and it does have a lot of horror aspects to it. I hadn't seen it for a while, and going back to it yesterday, I definitely feel solid with that being my third pick. Yeah, how about yourself?
My third pick, I guess I was kind of on the fence between Thinner and what was it I watched yesterday? Oh, Event Horizon. And again, that's more of a sci-fi, but I think the structure of it is way more horror than it is sci-fi, and maybe kind of more so horror than Thinner. Thinner, I felt, was very comedic. There's lots of comedy peppered throughout it, and there's a fair deal of comedy peppered throughout Event Horizon, actually. One of the black guys in it, I haven't seen him in much stuff, so I don't know his name. He was like this comic relief guy, and like you'd have like a horrific scene, like, you know, taking place in hell, and then it would go to him like kind of cracking jokes and stuff and flirting with this his fellow crewmate. So I think that it's my number three. My number 3 choice, yeah.
I might even, I didn't know we could go with the sci-fi because I'm thinking, that's a fantastic movie. But I was just thinking it's just too sci-fi. I'll save that for the sci-fi list. But,
yeah.
Well, as far as Jacob's Ladder goes, again, it's sort of a descent into madness. Like, I think we both kind of like these descent into madness stories, The Shining, American Psycho. But there's 3 parts to the movie. There's the Vietnam stuff, and then there's his life that he had with his wife and his kids, which I don't know if that's real or not. And then there's this other wife that he's got, where he's got no kids and he's losing his mind, and he's the post office worker. So there's like 3 narratives in the story, but it doesn't make it overcomplicated to follow at all. And they cut between it, and it's just really jarring editing. It's paced a little slow in the beginning, but it really ramps up as it gets going. Tim Robbins, fantastic actor. I think it was one of his first serious roles, and he just carries that film. Super believable as a war vet, which isn't a difficult role to play. And just weird vibe to the movie, like all the background, like, you know, people talking or something. Like, it's very muted, very muffled. It's always like the foreground audio that's there, and then the streets are like empty. Like, he seems to go to all these places where it's very dreamlike because it's all empty streets. So there's a real mood, a real vibe with it. The makeup's fantastic. And I just like the theme of like the guilt and the regret and the trauma of war and all that. So yeah, just an unnerving, uneasy feeling film.
I think it keeps you guessing throughout it. You're like, which reality is real and what's going on? Like, really just trying to figure out like what is happening here. Like, who's the bad guy? You know, it's like who's after him, you know? Yeah, no, it's really good. But again, it's a movie that kind of transcends genres, right? To pigeonhole it as any movie, like you said, it has like these horror aspects, you know, like because he's living a nightmare, so to speak. You know, he's experiencing a nightmare. But then it's, you know, a kind of a drama of a guy trying to figure out what's wrong, you know, what's wrong with himself. Just to hop back to Event Horizon before we jump to our number 2 picks, like what is very horror about it is that each like crew member is getting hunted down by this evil entity. One, like hell plays a huge role in it. So automatically that's like, you know, like kind of jumping into that horror genre. But each person getting hunted down based on like their biggest fear, kind of like flatliners, you know, like very similar to flatliners now that I think about it. You know, they go to hell. They die and then they go to hell and bring back a piece of hell with them. But it's like a ship that does it in this case. But yeah, very horror in that it's pretty much like a slasher flick. It's, you know, a little more complex given the sci-fi elements to it. But people getting hunted down one by one. It has like that slasher flick vibe to it.
It also has that descent into madness with Sam Neill's character too. So
Yeah, and each character too, because their mind's playing tricks on them. Like the woman, like keeps seeing her disabled kid running around the ship, and like she's like, "Oh my god, I gotta like help my kid." You know, they're hallucinating. Everyone's hallucinating, right? Similar to Jacob's Ladder.
yeah, we got a lot of parallels with these movies. Okay, so what was your number 2?
Well, I just blabbed on a bit there. Why don't you
Number 2
give the audience a break from me blabbing? And what was your number 2?
would be Exorcist 3, and that's like a strong pick there. I don't know where this movie, like I would never go for this movie like 5 years ago, but rewatching it, noticing how unorthodox it is, because it was written by and directed by William Peter Blatty, who wrote the original novel for Exorcist. And the second movie, Exorcist 2, is no good. But this third one is from 1990. It's much later, and it's just very offbeat. Like there's no rhythm to it. It's just very off kilter. And the acting performance, George C. Scott holds the film really well. It's got tension. It's cut in weird places. It's got humor in the right places, like clever humor. And it's about, faith versus science, because George C. Scott doesn't believe in God, and he's talking to the priest. And editing, pacing, really good for a 90s horror film. The sound design, huge standout. Like all the boxes for me, like I just got everything ticked here. Like there's no real flaws. There's like these fast, like I was saying, whip zooms, and really interesting like angles, low angles, high angles. Dialogue, believable, creepy, clever, and the story itself, it's like it's constantly keeping you guessing because they're not showing the killer. Like we finally find out that it's jumping from body to body, which we don't know whose body it's in, so we still don't know where the danger is going to come from. One big flaw I have with the film, and it's a big flaw, is all the Brad Dourif scenes in the prison just seem totally out of place, over the top dialogue. Brad Dourif, over the top performance. And I think the movie should have stopped at the scene, which is about 3/4 into it, where they go to George C. Scott's house and try to get his family. I think the movie should have stopped there. Instead, he goes back and the movie finishes in this prison cell thing, which just doesn't work for me at all. And if that scene all those scenes in the prison were gone, everything about this film would be like 100 top for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that was a blab.
What was that?
That was a blab.
Oh yeah, no, fair enough. Like I couldn't really jump in because it's been a while since I've seen it, and I know I've only seen it once, so I couldn't really contribute to any insight into it. But I don't know, that says something about because Brad Dourif is a really good actor. So it says something that the scenes with him were, lackluster, for lack of a better word, because I haven't seen it, I can't comment on it. But yeah, that it was disappointing to you, that says something about how, misplaced those scenes were. My number 2 is Arachnophobia, and there was a lot of films to choose from. Like that was kind of the era where we grew up, the 90s, like 80s, we're still little kids, but like that was kind of, like the prime of our childhood when we're really starting to get more independence and autonomy and get to choose the movies we want to watch. And there's a lot of good movies that came out then. Like I almost put Fallen on the list, but it's more of a mystery thriller than it is a horror, though it kind of is. And what was the other one I almost put on there? Fallen, and it was another. Jacob's Ladder. I almost put on there. But what I found is that I really like horror comedy. It's not like the slapstick parody spoof stuff that I like. Though I enjoyed Scary Movie, and there's some other ones that I enjoy. But I really like when they carefully weave a lot of comedy into a horror subject. So anyway, it's Arachnophobia. Number 2, Arachnophobia. Scoring perfect. Jeff Daniels had there was a few moments in his performance. I think that he didn't really. It's a tough thing to do, to delicately weave in a subtle comedy into a like dark subject matter like that. And I think there's only a couple moments where the delivery of his lines were just a little over the top, but other than that, great actor performances. Scoring appropriately used. The last scene with him fighting the giant spider, again, a little over the top, but other than that, it's like really spooky, and I think it caters to a very common fear that people have, fear of spiders, you know, and kind of like Jaws, you know, fear of like what's beneath the ocean's surface when you're out swimming in the ocean or a natural body of water. So I think it totally touched on a universal, relatable fear that people have, and it's a Spielberg produced thing, so it's just like, you know, amazing cinematography. So yeah, that's like virtually a flawless movie in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, I guess because you hadn't seen Exorcist 3, I have not seen Arachnophobia since we were kids.
Right, yeah.
And again, comedy horror is not my favorite, but I would like to go back just to see if I'm going to look at it different. I've done that, you know, 10 years, 20 years later, we go back and watch these movies, we get the appreciation for them. But always love the horror movies where it's like you're scared of the shower in Psycho, and you're scared of the water in Jaws, and the next film we're going to pick too is sort of like that too. They take something that's supposed to be relaxing, nature, and then they, you know, show you the dark side.
Yeah, and I think that again, well, okay, let's just name it. It's Blair Witch Project.
Blair Witch Project.
And I think it's our number one. And I think that, yeah, you're right. Hit the nail on the head that it's a common fear, you know, when you're out camping in the woods, you know, it's like, you know, what's out there? You know, is it a bear? Is it a mountain lion? Or, you know, or is it some creepy weirdo out there? So, yeah, it definitely tunes into that universal fear of the dark kind of, you know.
The theme that I was thinking of when I was watching was naivety kills. Naivety. So you go in to any situation, if you're not prepared and you haven't done your research on it, like, you know, be careful what you wish for. Another theme is like how far people will go for art or adventure or thrill. Mm-hmm. And, you know, exploring the unknown, it can be really dangerous. Mm-hmm. And there's so much good stuff about this film. The pacing's really good. The whole first 50 minutes is just interviews and exploring the lore and the myth of this, and really building up your anxiety about what this thing is. And then 50 minutes in it, they're in the forest, and then I think 25 minutes, they're starting to get lost. So pacing, fantastic. We talked about the acting a little bit. Yeah. I don't know if you want to mention anything about
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that it's kind of like how it incidentally worked out for the subject matter. Like they didn't really have to be good actors because they're playing people who aren't actors, or they're playing people who have cameras stuck in their faces. Like if you take, you know, average person off the street and put them on camera, they're going to be a little nervous. So the fact that you know, their acting at times is rough around the edges. It works because, you know, that nervousness that they might have having a camera in their face is, you know, what happens in reality. So I thought that was perfect. Yeah, I don't know. It just, and that also accompanied the fact that they're using handheld cameras, right? So it just adds to that homemade, it's okay to be imperfect kind of thing. You know, it's like punk music, for example, like, you know, real punk music, not pop punk music, but like the original, you know, punk bands, it was okay to be rough around the edges because that was appropriate for the genre and the style of the music. So I think, yeah, their acting was well suited for the subject matter, or like the concept of the found footage thing.
Well, I didn't think it was good. They weren't trying to be clever with the dialogue. I think if it was remade, and I think the new Blair Witch, trying to be clever, if your acting skills aren't that good, the writing is written all clever, it's not going to work. But you know, when they do have a laugh, it's because they're like starving and they're delirious, and it's just like an off the cuff thing. And really, the directors just gave them a camera, sent them in the woods with some granola bars, and then terrorized them at night with sounds. Sound design is fantastic in this movie, super creepy. The babies they hear. Yeah, the camera work, again, it seemed like everything worked in the favor, because it's dizzying, almost, not just disorienting, but dizzying, and sometimes, which kind of works for the film because they're running through the frickin' forest. Mm-hmm. No music in the film, which makes it even more like a documentary. Mm-hmm. So they really like had a vision with this film. They stuck to it. The voodoo dolls, crazy. Editing was quick, jarring, abrupt. Yeah, what else can I say about this movie? The ending, what did you think about the ending?
I really enjoyed the ending. I like how they left it. I think maybe when I first watched it, I had a kind of a less like developed palate, so to speak. I'm not trying to sound pretentious at all. I just at the time, well, I don't know. It's a good little trick. It kind of makes you want to watch it again and then see if you can figure out like what happened at the end, or watch it again to see if there was something you missed like visually. But I like that open ending. I thought it was like really spooky, and it just leaves the audience, or left me unnerved.
Yeah, unnerved for sure is the word for it. And what adds to that unnerving, I think, is two things. They never show the monster or the witch or whatever, right? So that's in your imagination, and most movies always show the monster, these horror movies. And the second one is nobody gets like killed on camera. They just disappear, and that's just way more scary to me, is that subtleness when you're writing your story is just like the less that's known, the more that's a mystery, the scary it is, right?
And I think that it puts you in the shoes of the characters, because that's what they're experiencing too. They're not seeing everything that's happening. And I think also with the shaky handheld camera movement, it's disorientating, just like they are, right? They're lost, right? So yeah, I think there's so many like, it's almost like these things just fell into place. It's just so like kind of ingenious that it's like how did they figure it out? And then they market it as it was like, as though it was a true story, as it was found footage, and those character actors at the beginning, like, oh yeah, the Blair Witch, we've seen her around, like that, like all, it's just like such good acting. It was just all around super believable. And I thought just the idea of like witchcraft, and yeah, like you said, the little like voodoo dolls and stuff, it was so like fresh at the time. Like so many people have like taken that and run with it, big franchises. But yeah, at the time it was fresh, new, in so many different aspects, from like the concept to the themes and
the mood, everything. Yeah, for me, it's like I picked it for originality, number one, but also it's definitely got a mood to it, and it's only an hour and 20 minutes. They didn't try to make it add extra thing. It's leanly cut. Highly recommend Blair Witch Project. I know a lot of people that don't like it, but easily number one for me for 90s horror.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So there's our 90s top horror
I'm
picks.
excited to go to the 80s next.
Oh,
that's for sure.
Well, that's going to be tough to narrow it down to three each.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got a lot of viewing to do.
Fine with me.
All right. So until next time, like, subscribe, leave a comment below, and tune in next week for another episode.
Thanks for watching, guys.